Boker Tov. Today's Daf Yomi is Bava Metzia, Chaf Ches Bava Metzia 28. And we're going to start on 28a, 5 lines from the top. The Gemara is discussing the question, do we say that if you give a siman, a sign on something, that's biblically a way to regain it, or only rabbinically a way to regain it? So the Gemara says that Amar Rava Siman and Diaraisa. Rava says signs are biblical. It says that if you find something, you bring it to your house, it should be with you until your brother seeks it out. Until your brother seeks it. What do you mean? You think you're going to give it to him before he seeks it out? You have to seek him out. You have to investigate him to see whether or not he's a liar or not. And how do you investigate him? Well, you investigate him with signs. So Shema Mina, we see from here that signs are biblical law. Amar Rava says, no, Imtim Salomar Siman and Diaraisa. Rava says, even if you want to say that signs are biblical, Mar says, Imtim Salomar Apashale. What do you mean, Imtim Salomar? We just answered this question, what signs are biblical. So the Gemara says, Apashale Siman and Diaraisa, we just said signs are biblical. So the Gemara says, no, it's not a proof. Mishum the Iko Maimer, you could have taken that verse and interpreted it Kiddushanina, like we learned on yesterday's stuff, that means you investigate him with witnesses, not necessarily with signs. But okay, so if you would say that signs are biblical, simanin v'simanin yoniach, and if two different people bring signs, you have to leave it till Eliyahu and Navi comes. Simanin ve'edim, let's say one person has signs and one person has witnesses. Yinason ba'al edim, give it to the one who has the witnesses. Simanin v'simanin ve'edechad, one person has signs and the other one has signs and one witness. Eidechad commando leisidami. The one witness is not going to help the situation. We're not going to include that in the calculations. V'yaniach, so you have to just leave it till Eliyahu and Navi comes. Eidei ariga ve'eidei nefilo. Let's say one has a group of witnesses to the production of the item, and one has a group of witnesses to the item falling. Tinasal eidei nefila. Give it to the witnesses that. Give it to the one who are witnesses to the falling. The Amrinan Zibune Zabne, because we could say the guy who made it sold it. He sold it away and fell from somebody else. Midas Arko, Midas Rachba. One guy has says he knows the length, and the other guy knows the width. Tinasel Midas Arko. Give it to the guy who knows the length. The Midas Rachba Shiuri Kamashar. Wow. Kan Machsoi Mara Vikai. Because the guy who knows the width, he could just see it when the guy stands up, whereas the guy who knows the length, that's harder to tell. But the measurements of the length he wouldn't know. One guy knows the width and the width, and the other guy knows the total amount. Raj says related to the Greek letter gamma. The rachmo. Give it to the person who knows the length and the width, because it's harder to state than just guessing the total amount. Midas arko, midas rachmo, midas mishkalos. One guy knows the length and the width, and the other guy knows the weight. Yinasam midas mishkalos. Give it to the person who knows the weights. Who omer simani aget? He knows the signs on the get. The husband knows signs on the get. He omeres simani aget, and she knows signs on the get. Dinasin, you're going to have to give it to her. If he knows the signs on the get and she knows the signs on the get, you give it to her. On what basis is she going to be able to identify the get? If we're going to say she knows the length and the width, maybe when he was holding it, she saw it. So that's not a proof. So no, she identifies that there's a hole on one letter. That's the way she gets the get. He says, I know the signs of the strings. And she also knows signs on the strings. you give it to her. Because the fact that he knows the signs doesn't mean anything, because he obviously had to have had the get at one point. So that in itself is nothing. So if she knows signs, you give it to her. And what are the signs on the strings? If you want to say it's with the white string or the red strings. Well, maybe when he was holding it, she saw it. Ela b'midas arco means she knows the length of the strings. Hu omer b'chafisa, he says it was in a bag. He omeres b'chafisa, and she says it was in a bag. You know, you give it to him. My taima, because what's the reasoning? Made the yada the koma de islay b'chafisa hu demanachik. Because she knows he's going to stick everything in a bag. So therefore, saying it's in a bag is not a simon, and so therefore that's not enough for her to collect the get. Hold on 1 second. Okay. Now up to the Mishnah. Ad matai chayav lahachris. How long, when a person finds the lost object, how long must he announce it for? Ad kadesha yedu bo shlinav, until the neighbors know about it. That's the position of Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Yehuda says shalosh regalim. You have to wait 3 festivals. V'achar regal acharon shiva yamim. And after the last festival, you have to wait another 7 days. Kadesha yelach beso. So that you should be able to go to his home for 3 days, then come back for 3 days, and then announce it one day where he was. So after the last festival, Rabbi Yehuda says to wait for another 7 days. Tana Shechne Aveda. So it says you have to announce it until the neighbors know about it. So we say the neighbors are the lost object. The Gemara says, what can that mean? My Shechne Aveda. What neighbors of the lost object are there? Ilema Shechenim Debal Aveda. If you want to say these are the neighbors of the owner of the lost object, well, the other way, if he knows who the owner is, anyway, he should obviously go and return it. No, the neighbors are the places where you found the lost object until they know about it. Rabbi Yehuda says 3 festivals plus another 7 days. Raminu, how could you say it takes 3 days to get home? But we learned in Maseches Tainis that that on the 3rd day of Cheshvan, they ask for rain. Rabbi Gamliel says B'zayin bo shehu tesva yom achar. So he says on the 15th day, which is on the 7th day of Cheshvan, which is 15 days after the festival. So the last one could get to the Euphrates. So we see from here that it's not 3 days, it's 15 days to get to the Euphrates River. And so Amar Rav Yosef Okasha, Kama Mikdash Rishon, Kama Mikdash Sheni. So Rav Yosef says, no, how do we explain it? One is in the first temple, one's in the second temple. The Mikdash Rishon did Nefisha Yisrael Tuva in the first temple, where there were a lot of people. That there were Judea and Israel. There were many like the sand on the sea, and this was in the first temple. Even before the temple, the Jewish people split. They were known as Judah and Israel. But then we need 2 weeks to get to place. There's a lot of traffic. But Mikdash Sheni, in the second temple, the Lona Fisha Yisrael Tuva, there were not a lot of Jews in the second temple who came back to live in Israel. It says about them in Nehemiah, the entire community together was Arba Ribo, was 40,000, Alpayim Shalosh Shishim, 42,360. That was the whole big Ganze Kehillah of the Jews who came back. So therefore, it doesn't take 2 weeks to go back. It just takes 3 days because less traffic. So Amar Abaye Vaksiv Vayeshvu HaKohanim Valaviyim HaMashorim VaShorim V'Kol Yisrael Ba'arayim. And all the Kohanim, the Levites, and the Mashorim, they all stayed in their tents. So meaning to say, and since that's the case, since it's the case that they all went to live in their tents, Meaning, say even though there was fewer of them, they were all spread out in their cities, and they were just as far away. So what do we care? So Ipcham Estar, it's more logical to assume the opposite, says Abai. Since they were in the same distances, we could say Mikdash Rishon in the first temple, then Afisha Yisrael Tuva, there were more Jews, and the Mitzavas Alma, and so therefore, since there were more Jews, so there were a lot of people going back and forth, meaning to join together to get rides, so it went quicker. Mishtachli Shayarta, they found caravans. The Azla Bain Biyama Ben there are caravans going day and night. Well, you don't need 2 weeks in the first temple. Vesagi B'Twas and the first temple wasn't enough for 3 days. Mikdasheni in the second temple, the Lona Fisha Yisrael Tuva, there were not a lot of Jews. But in the second temple, where there wasn't a lot of travel options, you needed more time. So Rava says, Lo Shna Mikdash Rishon, Lo Shna Mikdash Sheni, so Rava says, no, a different answer. The reason is, even though it takes 2 weeks to go back, but it doesn't matter if it's the first temple or the second temple. There was a limit. The rabbis understood that you're doing a mitzvah, so they didn't make you work too hard. And Amar Avina, Shema Mina, that the fact that the rabbi said, just go there and go back, and they didn't give you any extra time, Ki machris guima machris. The person who makes the announcement, he's supposed to say, I lost a coat. I found the coat. Because if you're going to say that he's supposed to say, that I found the lost object, but you have to give everybody more time to check all their clothing. So you shorten it by saying I lost the cloak. I found the cloak. He says I found the coat. Rava says Rava says no. Go back to the same answer I gave before. Even if it says I found an object and he doesn't mention it, still we only give him a week after that. Rabbis didn't make him work too hard because they recognize he's doing a mitzvah. Tana Rabbanan Regal Rishon, the first festival, he says, Regal Rishon, this is the first festival where I found it. Regal Sheni, the second festival, he says, Regal Sheni, this is the second festival. Regal Shlishi, the third festival, he says, Stam, I just found this. I found an object. But why? Lema Regal Shlishi, why doesn't he say it's the third festival? We don't want him to confuse it with the second festival, and they'll think that he said second festival instead of third. Sheni Nami, well, the second festival also on top of Chav Chasam and Beis. He'll come to confuse it with the first one. Gemara says, no, well, no, even if he misses up the second one, he thinks it's the first. He's going to figure it out by the third one that he doesn't have any time. Tana Rabbanan, Barishona. At first, at first, whoever found the lost object will make an announcement about it for 3 festivals. And after the last festival, for 7 days, like we said in our Mishnah, so you go back 3 days, go 3 days, come back 3 days, and announce for 1 day. But when the temple was destroyed, that it should speedily be rebuilt. You can't just say the temple will be destroyed without adding in those words. That's what the Lubavitcher Rebbe says. You have to know right away. You have to just feel the pain. So once the temple was destroyed, they said that you have to make these announcements in the synagogues and in the yeshivas, meaning to say it's not just about a lost object, because we are the ones who are lost without the temple, and therefore we have to be machrizim to Hashem Yisparach in the synagogues and yeshivas. And when the strong-armed people came about, they used to have to tell just their neighbors, and the people they knew, Vidayo, and that's sufficient. And who are these strong men? What did they do? They said all lost objects go to the king.
This is for the person.
Exactly. Rabbi Ami Ashkach. Exactly. Rabbi Ami Ashkach Odaya de Dinare. Rabbi Ami found a bag of coins. Chazyahu Barnash. He saw a person, just like a regular guy, but the Nasach Acher says it's a Roman, Baroma, the Kamirsas. He saw that this Roman was afraid. The Roman said, don't worry about it. Take it for yourself. I'm not a Persian. I'm not a Persian who tries to confiscate everything you find for the king. Tanarabanan, Evan Toain Isa Birushalayim. There was a stone called the Evan Toain stone. There was this stone called the Toain stone, and Kol Misha Avdalo Aveda, whoever lost an object, Nifnel Hashem would go there to look for it. Kol Misha Motze Aveda, whoever found an object, Nifnel Hashem would go there. Zel Meilu Machri is. This one would stand up and announce it. Vizen omei v'nosin simanim. This one would stand up and give a siman. V'notol and take it. V'zui sheshaninu tzura uim nimcha seven. That's why Choni Amagal said, go see if this Evan, this stone, was covered up by the rain. That's what they were referring to. Amar esaveda v'lo amar simanah. Let's say he said the lost object, but he didn't say the signs associated with the lost object. Well, then you do not give it to him. Varamai and the liars, Afapisha Amar, Simanea, the liars, even though they said the sign on it, do not give it to him. Shenemar, Adrosh Achicho so. Says until your brother seeks it out. You have to look to see if your brother is a liar or not. He says, what do you announce? You say, I found a lost object. Rabbi Gamliel says, Glima machris. He says, you announce, I found a coat. Yehuda says, Avedas machris. You say, announce, I found a lost object. The Amr is Glima machris. Because if you want to say, I found a coat, Chashina or Ramai, we're worried about the liars. Rav Nachman says, Glima machris. You announce a coat, Ramai or Chashinan. You're not worried about the liars. The Imkain ain't what ever soft, because otherwise there's no end to it. Because what's the concern about, you say, if you found the coat, then this guy will know that person wants the coat and give a simon. Well, even if it's just a lost object, this guy can know that guy lost a lost object and lost an object and give a simon. So let's see who's right. Is Rabbi Yehuda right? He says you announce a lost object, or Rav Nachman says you announce a coat. Tanan Amar Saveda v'lo Amar Simana Harei Zeh Lo Yiten Lo. We learned in our Mishnah if he said the lost object but not the signs, you don't give it to him. No, Amar Spishlam Aveda Samachris. If you want to say he makes an announcement on the lost object, that's all he says. Akamashwan, Da'afagav, Da'amar Glima. Now it's going to teach us that even though he says it was a coat, Kilomar Simanin, that if he doesn't actually say a sign, just saying a coat is not sufficient. Elayamars Glima Machers, if you want to say announces a coat, Amar Iu Glima, Amar Iu Glima Chichomim. Well, if the guy says, I found the coat, and the guy says, I lost the coat, obviously it's not enough. So the Gemara says, no, kilo amar simanin, well, what's the chiddush there? So it must be that it says an evedasa machers like Rav Yehuda. So it says Amar of Safar, no, like Rav Nachman. Well, all of them glima machers. He announces a code, and Amar ihu glima, Amar ihu simanin. So the first guy says, I found the coat, and the guy says, let me give you a sign on the coat. Milo Amar simanah. What does it mean? He didn't say a sign. He didn't say a great sign. He gave an average sign. He said maybe something that didn't really rise to the proper level. So the Gemara said, yeah, Varamai and the liars, even though they said the signs, we don't give it to him. At first, whoever lost an object would give a sign and take it. When the liars increased, it's then they said you have to bring witnesses, you're not a liar, Vitol, and then you can take it. Like Rav Papa's father, Rav Papa's father lost his donkey, and then he found it. So he came to Rav Barafuna, so Rav Papa's father lost his donkey. He came to Rav Barafuna and he said, bring me witnesses that you're not a liar, Vitol, that you could take it. Also, so Rav Papa's father brought witnesses. So Rav Barafuna said, he said to them, Yadatim Beiduramayu, do you know if he's a liar? Amalei, and yeah. So Rav Papa's father was upset. He said, Amalei, you think I'm a liar? Ramah, no, I'm a liar. Amalei. Anan Lav Ramayat coming in. No, we meant to say you're not a liar. I'm a Rabbi Rafuna. Yeah, that's logical. Mistaber, these were this guy's character witnesses. He's not going to bring character witnesses that give him a problem. So now we say, called over to Otsev Ochel, Yasev Yeyachel. By the way, so what's the point of the witnesses if you of these character witnesses if we only believe them if they say something good about him? Called over to Otsev Ochel, Yasev Yeyachel. So anything now, so now we see it's not enough just to pick up the object and try to find the owner. You have to go so far as to take care of it while it's in your possession until such time as you find the owner. But now let's say this object is something that you could that it produces something, like let's say an ox or a donkey, that it could work, and that money can pay for its food. Then Yasev Yeyachal. Then you work it and pay for its food that way. But something that doesn't produce food, you have to sell it. As it states, Vashevosa lo. Return to him. You have to see how it can return to him. So the Gemara says, what do you do with the money? Basically, if you say you sell it, what do you do with the money? Rabbi Tarfon says, Yishtamish ben. He says you could use the money. Therefore, since he's being able to use it, he's a borrower. And and if he loses it, he's responsible. Rabbi Kiva says, Kiva says, you're not allowed to use the money, so you're a shomer chinam, you're a watchman for free. So if you lost it, then you're not responsible. So what are you supposed to do? Supposed to work it forever? I'm Rav Nachman, I'm Shmuel, I'd Yud Beis Chodesh, till 12 months. Anything that produces food could go in para v'chamor, like a cow or a donkey. You work it until 12 months. You evaluate their money and you put the money aside. Calves and baby donkeys, you leave them for 3 months. From then on, you evaluate their money and you leave it. Goose and geese and chickens, 30 days you keep them. After that, you evaluate and leave it to the side. Nachum bar Yitzchak Tarnagolas, Behema Gasa. Amar Nachum bar Yitzchak Tarnagolas is Kibehema Gasa. That a hen is like a large animal, meaning to say you can keep it around. And just like a large animal, like an ox, you could work it for 12 months. So to a hen, since it produces eggs, it's the same law. You keep them for 12 months, the hen and the ox. From that point on, you put it this side. You keep the calves and the baby donkeys for 30 days. So the Gemara and then last case of this price is Avazim and Tarnagolan called Shatipu Maruba Mislara Matal Ben Shloshiyam. Geese and chickens and anything that you're not going to get back your value, you work them only 3 days. From that point on, you put them to the side and you hold them. So anyway, we say Kashya Agolim Usiyachin Agolim V'siyachin. So you have a difficulty between calves and donkeys and calves and donkeys. In one source, it's 30 days. In one source, it's 3 months. And also, avazim tarnagolan, geese and chickens on geese and chickens. In one source, it's 30 days. In one source, it's 3 days. So that's not a difficulty about calves and donkeys. One is where they can graze. Then you keep them around for 3 months. But then one case is where it's 30 days, is there's no grazing and you need to pay for them. If it's a large geese, then they eat a lot. Therefore, you're only required to keep them around for 3 days before selling them. But if it's small geese, then you keep them around for 30 days. Okay, we could go on a little bit. Let me stop the recording.